So I'm sure many of you have heard by now that we could be possibly getting a new tier added to the game. While we do not have a time frame for it, they teased it though, so I would hope it's this year sometime, but we do know how wargaming likes to keep us on the edges of our seats. Only time will tell. There are quite a few questions that it raises though, and while I am going to be wildly guessing and speculating on a lot of this and might make a complete fool of myself, some parts of it I can answer. Like why we need a tier 8. The speculation part of this video, we can kind of guess what ships will be coming and how the new economy could look. So we're going to tackle those topics and more in this video, so without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with what we actually know. This image was released early Saturday morning and it clearly shows the Roman numerals for 8. The more astute observers would also notice that in these pile of cards of ships, we have a tier 8 ship hidden here with 2 letters visible, ON. Now the only ships that seem to match up from this when looking through the PC version of the game is the Roon, which is a German heavy cruiser at tier 9 on PC and bridges the gap between the Hipper and the Hindenburg at tier 10. That's all we really know. The community managers have not divulged any additional information to us community contributors. We're all in the same boat here. So for starters, why do we think this is happening? That one's pretty easy to answer. The discrepancy between tier 7 ships and legendary tier ships is large. And if you frequent tier 7, you have a pretty good idea of how frustrating it can be to be up-tiered against some of these extremely powerful ships. Insane DPM for the light cruisers like the Worcester is going to demonstrate in the background here. Very powerful battleships like Yamato Conqueror, lightning-fast destroyers like Colbert and Kaba. There is just a large difference between the legendary ships and the ones at tier 7. And to illustrate that, I'm going to show you some specific examples. Let's look at Cleveland at tier 7 and the Worcester at legendary tier. Worcester has about 8,000 more health, and with heals nearly 11k more health. That's the effective health number. The armor, no comparison at all. Worcester has a 32mm bow, which can bounce every shell in the game except for Yamato's 460mm shells. Base reload for these ships. Worcester is nearly 2 seconds faster, giving it a damage output that is miles above Cleveland. And we won't even take into account shell penetration, which after Worcester's super buff, it has an advantage there as well, 30mm stock. Continuing the comparison, Cleveland AA, 5 kilometers is the base range and the DPS is 363, Worcester's 6 kilometers, DPS 495. Mobility is essentially the same here. What adding a tier 8 would do is kind of bridge the gap between these two ships. So let's go back and look at these stats now with Seattle in between there. The Seattle, I'm guessing, would be the tier 8 American light cruiser that would possibly make its way into our game. So we can very easily start to visualize the stepping stone that Seattle places in this line of American light cruisers. The difference in AA and health of Seattle is going to help bridge this gap, and it's going to mean legendary ships won't have such a huge advantage anymore over the next tier down. Just to illustrate the point a little more, let's look at one more example. The German battleships. Let's keep it really simple this time and just look at health pools. These are brawling, tanking battleships, and their playstyle involves being damage sponges. So Bismarck, 69,000 health. Großer Kurfürst, 95,000 health. I mean, this is a huge discrepancy in one tier of ships. But again, let's add in a tier 8 on Legends. How about the Friedrich Der Grosse? We have a much smoother transition, a more equal playing field, as that German battleship is going to come in with 84k health. Alright, I rest my case. You can take these examples and apply it pretty much across the board to battleships, destroyers, and cruisers. The days of legendary tier ships beating the absolute crap out of tier 7s is about to end, and I could not be more happy. Tier 8 will be a great stepping stone and even the playing field for legendary ships when they are top tier. Now, on to the next question that comes up. What ships will go where? And this is where things get a little muddled, as in Legends we have quite a few PC tier 9 ships currently at tier 7. Jean Bar, Iowa, Missouri. These are all tier 9 ships on PC. They're tier 7 on ours. The Somers, that's a tier 10 destroyer on PC. She's tier 7 in our game. Fletcher, Black, Tashkent, Udaloy, Riga, tier 9 ships that are currently at tier 7 or going to be in the case of the Black. Alaska even, the legendary cruiser in our game, is a tier 9 on PC. So things are going to be a little complex, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think it's clear, and we're just going to have to kind of reserve ourselves to knowing this. Our version of the game will just have some differences in the PC version, and I think that's okay. In the case of premium ships being moved, Weimar is supposedly being moved up a tier in the name of balance, so I wonder what will happen with the Jean Bart and the Missouri. Possibly moved up to tier 8? Who knows? It will be interesting to see how it plays out. Tech trees, I don't know how much they would really alter the tech trees. You know, there's probably a big risk of pissing people off who are currently grinding, you know, specific lines. I really don't have an answer there. I'm just curious. We'll have to see how they're going to implement it. I would love to hear from you guys, though, what you think about it. Please leave it in the comment section down below, and I'd love to hear from you. One thing that I can make pretty accurate predictions on is what ships will be coming to Legends, and that's just as easy as scrolling through the PC WoW's wiki and looking at tier 9 ships that are currently not here, just like we did earlier with Seattle and the Friedrich Der Grosse. Buffalo. That is an American heavy cruiser, tier 9 on PC. I think she'll be coming here, tier 8, to bridge the huge gap between the Baltimore and the Des Moines. American destroyers, they're a little more difficult to tell. Like mentioned, Fletcher is a tier 9, Gearing is a tier 10, and I am unsure of what class of ships historically would fit in between there. The battleships as well. You know, Iowa, tier 9, Montana, tier 10. What are we going to have as a tier 8 on Legends? The only battleship I saw over there was the Minnesota, that's a tier 9. It looks like it's the stepping stone to the Vermont on PC, but yeah, unsure about that one. The Germans are pretty easy to see what would be coming. I think we'll see the Z-46 coming in at tier 8 to bridge the gap between the Z-23 and an eventual legendary tier German destroyer. The Roon will probably be coming over, as mentioned earlier, between the Hipper at tier 7 and the eventual Hindenburg at legendary tier. For the IJN, Yugamo would be a stepping stone between Kagero and Shimakaze. Kitakaze could be in the alternative Japanese destroyer line above the Akazuki and bridging the gap to the eventual Harugumo at legendary tier. Ibuki would be a tier 8 cruiser coming on over that would be right above the Mogami. Izumo would follow the Amagi at tier 7 and come in at tier 8, and it would bridge the gap to the legendary Yamato. I would assume those would be the first of the lines implemented for the tech trees, as they're probably the most popular nations. The Royal Navy could be close on the heels of that, with the Cossack as a destroyer, the Neptune as a cruiser or some variation, and I would be unsure about the battleships. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video was the economy, and I think we could see some changes there. For starters, I guess I'm going to assume it's 36 million silver to buy a tier 8 tech tree ship. Maybe? The usual 4.8 million silver for modules in slots 1 through 4. On the subject of earning the ships XP wise, again, assuming maybe we just double it, so 420,000? I don't know, sounds like a metric F-ton if you ask me, but I mean, if that's what it is, then that's what it is. Now, silver earning could change quite a bit as well. If you did not know, silver earning looked something like this chart here. Tier 7 has had a big nerf applied to credit earning, as you can see, and this is of course by design to try to keep the matchmaking between the lower levels balanced and equal to Tier 7. The thought behind it, it's more expensive to play at Tier 7 and legendary tiers, so players would eventually have to go back down to lower tiers, Tier 5, Tier 6, to grind credits. Well, now there's going to be a Tier 8. So, will we see this nerf to credit earning at Tier 7 go away? Maybe? If so, earning credits at tier 7 could finally be a good option as well, rather than dropping down to tier 6, which is now the go-to tier to rake in the silver, and, tier 5 as well. So if that went away, tier 7 could be a good credit earning tier. Time will tell. We could sit here and speculate all day, but alas, maybe we shouldn't. Let me know in the comment section down below, what are your guys' thoughts on some of the changes coming? Overall, I think it's great. I love it. More content, more variety, and a more balanced high-tier experience. It's exactly what we've been asking for. And maybe for once this whiny player base can be happy about something. New tech ships that don't cost any money, more than likely, and a shining example of the devs listening to the players. Coming up with a much better solution than I've really been hearing a lot of people say. Adding more features to the game rather than just making Legendary tier have standalone matchmaking. Brilliant. Anyways, that's my thoughts. This game in the background, it was a doozy, and even in the overpowered, overbuffed Woosta, we still couldn't pull this one out of the hat for the win, but it was a fun game nevertheless. I am curious how matches like this will go against, tier 8 ships that are a little more equal to play against. Anyways, with that, guys, be sure to hit the thumbs up button. I would greatly appreciate it, and subscribe to the channel with the notification bell on for future videos. I will catch you in the next one. See ya.